Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for talking to Diplomatic Connections.
My pleasure to be here talking to you.
I want to start off with the good news. In the past decade, Latin American countries, with a couple of exceptions, have, as it were, come of age, developing democratic systems, promising economies, and dealing perhaps more directly with the social problems and social issues. Where does Ecuador stand in this context?
Well, I think that this decade is the Latin American decade, definitely, and Latin America has managed, most of the countries in Latin America has managed to grow with a very interesting high rates, above 4% for the last 9-10 years, and Ecuador is not exception. I would say Ecuador stands out as a third country in Latin America with the highest growth in Latin America, and this has been happening also since year 2000. Ecuador has been enjoying very sound growth above 4%, and we have seen since 2007 when President Correa came as a president of my country, that those rates had speed up, not only because of we had been experiencing a higher oil price, but even the growth that we have experienced in the non-oil part of the economy of Ecuador, it's really extremely well. You remember the planetary crisis of 2008 and 2009. Yes. Even in those years, we managed to grow at a very decent rate, 1%. Taking in consideration the worldwide crisis, because we apply counter-cycle policies. We had used public investment and savings that came from a very early tax reform. We didn't increase taxes, but we cut all the loopholes for illusion and innovation, and we managed to collect 5 points of the GDP of Ecuador, which is a lot of money, and to invest those in infrastructure and human talent. And that created a really positive, a very positive cycle, because when you have top world infrastructure, you reduce cost of transactions for business, and they pour new investments. And when you invest in your citizens and your human talent of your citizens, of course, you have also a sense of dignity. I would say Ecuadorians have regained their pride, which is also very important as a culture factor to speed the growth and of our economy.
And also perhaps the fact that you were, in a sense, isolated in a sense from what was happening in the global economy at that particular point in 2008 worked to your advantage.
No, we are very connected to the world economy. I mean, we are a very, very open economy.
But I mean, you had banks that were perhaps more conservative in the way they approached lending.
What I will say is different is that we have a financial system that was regulated. And we have an early financial regulation law that, I don't know if you know, but 1998, we have a huge financial meltdown in Ecuador.
Absolutely.
We lost 8% of the GDP. We were hit by the Niño. We have a financial crisis. We have like 4 or 5 large banks failing.
And you went on the dollar.
And then we adopted the dollar later on, year 2000. As a consequence of that deep financial crisis. So we are very connected to the world. More than 40% of our economy, it's exports.
But you no longer operate on the dollar, do you?
No, we do. We're still a dollarized economy. Yes. It's something that it has a lot of advantages and, of course, some disadvantages. And having the dollar, salaries have been growing in real terms in the last years, and productivity need to be real. So that creates a need for innovation and creativity from the private sector, and of course also from the public sector.
Are you the only country that operates on the
US
dollar?
I think Salvador is also dollarized economy, and there are other economies such as Panama that they have their own currency, but they have a large amount of the economy that is being moved in the dollar currency. But I would say in Latin America that I know, Ecuador and Salvador.
One of the factors that gone into this development in Latin America has been more attention paid to regional institutions. In other words, you're coming closer together in terms of cooperation. How does Ecuador fit into that?
Well, Ecuador strongly believes that integration is the way to create common knowledge, to move forward common objectives, and of course, UNASUR has been one of the organizations, and as well as CELAC, that also includes the Caribbean countries and the Central American countries, to foster and trying to move forward. And I think it is very important to have all type of organization. You know, the OAS is also another venue that is very important because also include Canada and United States. And I think at the end, you know, you need to find the venues where you find common grounds and common goals and objectives in order to move forward those alliances. But integration is key. It's key in today's world.
Why is it, do you think, that the South American governments are moving towards the left?
Well, I think it reflects a history of Latin America. And we need to understand that Latin America is one of the most unequal regions in the world, and I would say, you know, each country has its history and its own context. You know, we share some values, we share principles, we share the language, but of course there are a lot of differences among the different countries that comprise Latin America. But I would say we share that inequality problem. In my own country, Ecuador, you know, for so many years the differences were so wide, and I would say the society was in a way captured by the power of the elites, that many oftentimes we're not in tune, you know, we're not sensible to the needs of inclusion of the poorest class of my country. So I would say in that environment where you have a lot of exclusion, where you have a lot of, when the market institutions have not benefit all, of course you have this sentiment to find a new model. And as much as in the United States, you know, you try to sometimes in my criteria oversimplify things when you have the good left and the bad left. There are so many differences among the different models, and all of them, you know, we should respect them because they reflect their own context, their own history, and the solution that each country has, the citizens of each country has decide democratically, you know, to take.
Ecuador does not have a free market economy. It's, I think, a mixture, isn't it?
Well, we do have a free market economy. We think the private sector is the engine of growth, but we believe that.
But you have some nationalized.
No, we haven't nationalized any single company. What we believe is different. We believe that, you know, markets shouldn't prevail on trump human beings, and that we should have markets, but they should serve also for human needs. I mean, we put the human being before markets, and in that regard, the state regulates, of course, our natural resources. We think we need to maximize those resources in order to invest them well back in our citizens. But that doesn't mean that the state owns any other private sector enterprises. I mean, we do not. But we believe that we don't believe in auto-regulation. We believe in the strong has a role in regulating those markets. So you make sure that through collective action, citizens can have access to health, you know, that it's high quality and cheap, affordable, and that citizens can have access to education, and of course that that society is not only driven, you know, by the need to maximize the profits, you know, for companies.
There, you mentioned now natural resources. There was a plan whereby the international community would contribute a certain amount of money. I think it was $350 million a year.
Yes. You're talking about the Jasuni.
I'm talking about just in order to prevent, in order to leave oil deposits in the Ecuadorian Amazon wetlands where they are.
Okay.
That plan seems to have not worked, and I think the Ecuadorian criticism is that the international community failed to deliver. So now and of course that has brought counter-criticism that of course now there is going to be exploration, or there is already exploration in those wetlands. What is the current position?
Let me first explain to our viewers what was our initial proposal. And I think it was a very innovative proposal because the Yasuni is a very, very biodiverse place in the world.
Park, in fact.
It's a national park, it's a protect park, and it is important to explain that we believe it's not only public good that is Ecuadorian, we believe it's a humanity public good. In that sense, our proposal, you know that actually now when you reforest, you can have, CO2 bonds that you can trade them. I mean, those CO2 have a value. So we were thinking, what about if we create more value avoiding those emissions? Do you see how it works?
Exactly.
It works.
Yes.
The market solution works now. You pollute, and in order to reduce this pollution, you need to forest, right?
Yes.
So what about avoiding that? So we call that the net avoided emissions.
Right.
And we calculated that we can provide, Ecuador, this middle-income country, can provide to the world half of the value of those net avoided emissions. And we thought, since this is a public good, a global public good, the international community will become our partner in this quest to preserve this worldwide patrimony and collaborate together to preserve this park. And this didn't happen, and I understand, I was very passionate about this idea, and my son, who is 17 years old, one day said to me, "Mom, but it's so difficult what you're trying to do and to promote, because it's like trying to sell oxygen to people. It's free." You know what I mean? It is very difficult to convey this sense of emergency and this sense of collaborating together, collective global action, to prevent the increase of CO2 emissions. And this is coming from a country that is a very green country with the greenest constitution that even provides rights to nature. And we are doing a lot, not being a polluter, not being a high emisser of CO2 emissions. And we tried this hard. We tried this for a couple of years, and we invest money trying to promote this idea all over the world. And in our view, it was perhaps ahead of times. You have the financial crisis, so many things going on, and as you see, climate change hasn't been really in the agenda of the developed nations, and it just started to be here in the United States. Just recently, Secretary Kerry made a really strong statement about it. But it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't in the agenda. It wasn't the time. It didn't work. And now we took the very sad, difficult decision of exploring the Yasuni. But doesn't mean that we're going to do it very responsibly, learning all the lessons that we have learned from the past. But of course, Ecuador is doing well, it's doing better, but we need those resources to reduce more poverty, to create the basis for innovation, to send more students abroad like we're doing now. 7,000 students, I mean, at the top universities in the world, but we need to send more. So in that sense, we are committed to do it in a very responsible way and to invest those resources wisely and back to the people in the regions where they will come from.
Where do you see your country in, say, 10 years' time?
Well, I see a country where we have already changed our production matrix, where we are exporting more bio-knowledge products. We're using more our biodiversity in a very sustainable way. I see a country that is really well known all over the world because it's a super tourism power. I see Ecuadorians being very successful. I mean, we have a lot of talent. I just was in Boston 2 days ago, and I found out that two younger than 25 Ecuadorians own a company named Leaf that is being funded with $30 million in the high-tech sector. I mean, we have a tremendous talent. So I see a country that has found its path for sustainable development and prosperity for all their citizens.
I wanted to ask you about bilateral relations with the United States, but you cannot really do that unless you also extend it and say that whatever else is going on, you do have 2 and now 3 disputes, let's say, on involving extradition. One, of course, is
yeah, extraditions and human rights refugees, like for us is Julian Assange.
Okay.
But I don't think those issues define.
Well, let me just sort of
yeah.
actually tell you who they are, just for the sake of the interview. One is Julian Assange, who has been a guest in your embassy in London for over a year now.
Yeah.
God knows how difficult that must make it for your embassy staff. The other, of course, is Edward Snowden, who is who may or may not, we don't know, have already asked for asylum in Ecuador. And the third, which is the reverse, is the Isaiah's brothers.
Isaiah brothers. Well, I think our bilateral relationship is beyond those issues, as important as they are, and I won't deny that we have a lot of distrust still in both sides of the relationship. But I think it's worth to highlight that both sides are committed to restart our political dialogue, and we have very concrete steps moving forward that direction. Secretary Kerry and Secretary Patino talked about a month ago. Undersecretary Lee is, as a matter of fact, today in my country, attending meetings with
Undersecretary Lee is involved with Latin America.
With Latin America, and it's the deputy of
it's hemispheric
Robert
affairs,
Jacobson. Yes, indeed. And later on in this year, we have a meeting. We are expecting to have Roberto Jacobson in Ecuador, and we're aiming to have a meeting among Secretary Kerry and Secretary Patino in order to launch our political dialogue. That means that we are committed. We are committed to both countries. We're committed to better our relationship. That doesn't mean that we have differences. Even in among families we have differences. But I don't think those differences should define a relationship, because we have a lot of also common interests. We have more than 1 million Ecuadorians living here in the United States. More and more North Americans are deciding to live in Ecuador, and we are embracing them up in arms in Ecuador. I mean, we have been the top retiree destination
for the last
5 years, and they are coming more and more every single day, and we are happy to have them in Ecuador. We have a vibrant trade. We have we have a record trade last year of $18 billion. So we have plenty of reasons to...
Is that bilateral or is that...
bilateral,
yeah.
18 billion bilateral trade. So let me talk a little bit about the difficulties that we have with the issues that you mentioned. When I talked to you about 1998, that was a very difficult time for my country. We experienced a meltdown of the economy, and we experienced a difficult and huge financial crisis. And one of the first banks that failed was the largest bank at that time, Filambanco, owned by the Zacarias brothers. And the government at that time, through the central bank, lent money to them,
yes.
and that money was dispersed to other means. And the Zacarias brothers had been found guilty of embezzling money, and that's a serious crime at that time, where you had depositors with the frozen accounts, you have elderly people that couldn't receive their medicines, and people even suicide and die. I mean, and we're talking here about a very, very emotional issue for the people of Ecuador. Even couple ambassadors of United States in my country, and we know that thanks to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, send cables, asking their country to kick these guys from your country. And what we found out now is they've been putting money through their families to very important political figures in the Senate that they already have accepted. They have lobbied for their green cards and for their cases.
Is there no
here.
extradition agreement between Ecuador and the United States?
We do have an extradition agreement, and actually the United States, the government of the United States, they claim that they are not related to any of these political issues, but they claim that they didn't have enough documentation to do the extradition. And another news in this case is just a couple of weeks ago, the second, we have like tires where you can, where sentencia, where a verdict can be contested.
And, you mean your appeal course?
Yeah, the appeal course, exactly. The second appeal was denied, and they all, the Cely brothers now have a constitutional recourse, of course, that I think they're going to use. There are enough proof that we have provided and that we're willing to provide. We sense a new openness in the administration to revise this case, and this is going to be part of a dialogue. We are open to discuss, of course. We really hope that we can work together to make justice prevail. And this is a very important issue not for the government. I mean, and this is not a political persecution when you have 7 governments from left to right trying to extradite them and get back to Ecuador.
As for, let's leave Mr. Assange aside, because I don't quite understand what's going to happen, likely to happen there, but has Mr. Snowden actually applied for
No,
asylum?
I don't think he formally applied for asylum. I think he was thinking to request asylum to Ecuador before finally deciding to request the asylum that he received from the government of Russia.
Why would Ecuador be attractive to either Mr. Snowden or Assange in that sense?
Because
what makes them more receptive to, dissidents of that sort?
Well, I will say that, Ecuador has a long tradition of human rights and a long tradition of respecting and receiving these kind of requests when the case are proven to be serious, in serious dangers for the person in related to the case. And I will say that we really went through all the documents that Mr. Assange presented, and we took all the international law and our national law in consideration. More important than that, the decision, as difficult as it was, and with the consequences that it carried, was taken in principle. And I would say that is what is our foreign policy notorious for. I mean, we do things, based on principle.
So do you think that, given the fact that the British authorities are certainly not going to let Assange get out of the embassy to take a taxi to the airport, do you foresee that he's likely to be there forever?
That's a very difficult case. It's a very difficult. There are new developments, new pieces to take in consideration. They're different from the moment that the cases start, but my country has still provided Mr. Assange with all the guarantees for him to remain at the embassy.
He is not, of course, the longest, the person who has longest taken refuge in a foreign embassy.
I don't believe so.
The record is held by Cardinal Mindszenty in Hungary, who sought refuge in the United States Embassy in Budapest in the 50s, in 1956 actually.
Indeed.
And was there till the 70s.
Indeed. I hope they can find a resolution, but it's not a case that my embassy is related to.
Well, given the fact that Latin American countries are coming closer together, cooperating more where they see their interests coincide, do you envision something happening along the lines of, say, the European Union? They have, to start with, one advantage, which is they all speak more or less a common language.
Well, Latin American, of course, we speak language, but Brazil that speaks Portuguese.
Well, except yes,
we have very strong ties with the European Union. As a matter of fact, this week we are in the second round of negotiations.
Absolutely, negotiations for tariff reduction.
A trade agreement. So that I hope it concludes with success in the following months.
And the EU is your second largest market.
It is our first large market for non-oil exports, actually, and then it's very close from to the United States. More or less,
right.
About the same amount of experts to both. We have very strong ties, of course, to Europe. We have very strong ties to Spain, and we have a lot of Spanish investment pouring in my country, as well as other Latin American countries, as Mexico, for example, that just recently did a large investment in my country. So we are integrated not only because of language and values, but also because of common interest.
Well, so the other dimension of that is that the United States has recently become more concerned about what is going on in Asia and of course, has this perennial problem of dealing with the Middle East. Do you think that the U.S. is losing influence in Latin America?
Well, Latin America is different. I mean, Latin America can come up with its own solutions. So we don't want more attention to the United States that is related to how, to fix our own problems. I think we would like to see more integration with United States regarding trade, energy, to untap a lot of our potentials. In that sense, and we were just having here a discussion with my colleagues from Latin America the other day just about this topic that you're asking me. And I would say Asia is more audacious. Businesses in Asia are more audacious, and they're looking proactively in Latin America to do more business. Let me just give you a couple examples. In my own country, we have built 30 new energy hydroelectric plants, right? So, I mean, we just are developing a new metro line for Quito, a $2 billion project. Who is bidding for those projects? By the way, it's being financed by the World Bank, by the Inter-American Development Bank, by the European Bank of Reconstruction. And we don't see American companies with a large appetite for coming in infrastructure deals, or neither United States having, a particular instrument, financing instrument, that can make these, large deals happen.
What about
in
AID?
Latin America.
Does that not AID? Does that not function along those lines?
Not that we don't know. Actually, when we were having this discussion with my colleagues, we noticed that there is a new agency here that is autonomous agency that it's now providing feasibility studies for this type of infrastructure deals that can be, interesting for United States getting more space in.
You mentioned now that you were discussing this with your Latin American colleagues. Do you actually compare notes frequently?
Well, actually, we have a lunch once a month, and I host this month lunch. It is a moment where we get together. We have guests, a guest speaker, and at least we see each other once a month.
You told me earlier that you were responsible, among other things, for tourism in Ecuador.
Yes, I used to be the minister coordinator of production, and I was in charge of leading like a sector. Now, each
Right.
ministry has its own minister. In Ecuador, you have 6 minister coordinators that do that. And in order to align, different ministers. In my case, I have agriculture, trade, commerce, tourism, the financial development banks, and my job was to create an agenda that integrates all of these aspects to foster more private investment and competitiveness in all those sectors. And tourism is really, really very close to my heart.
And it's a major source of revenue for your country, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and it has been growing at a very interesting rate, plus 8% in the last years. And just this trimester, and we launched this campaign about 2 years ago, Ecuador Love Life, and it just found out by the Minister of Tourism, Vinicio Alvarado, that in this first quarter we grew 20%. I mean, that's a large number, and Ecuador has become a very, very popular tourism destination. Just the New York Times, in the 42 list that they publish yearly, we are the top one among Latin American countries in that list. And we won, I don't know, like 7-8 awards and prizes last year.
What do tourists look for in Ecuador?
But the thing is, Ecuador, we are very blessed. We have a bit of everything. You know, we have the rain, we have the coast, we have the volcanoes, areas, mountains with white top snow, and in the Andean part, and then we have the rainforest, and the cherry on top, of course, we have the Galapagos Islands. And you know, my country's always been a beautiful, biodiverse, with very warm people. Which is different now is that we have the infrastructure. We have great roads, ports, new airports, and a great hotel infrastructure with a lot of investment, national and international investment. So we know we can host properly, and we have taken our shy. We decide not to be shy anymore about this treasure that we have. And we decide to share it to the world. And I think this campaign and the new campaign that I'm giving you the first news, we're going to launch on April 1st in New York and all over the world. The campaign, we're taking Borrow, the son of the Beatle, All You Need Is Love. And the campaign motto is All You Need Is Love, All You Need Is Ecuador. And Paul McCartney is going to be April 23rd in Ecuador. We're very happy to host him in Ecuador, and the campaign and the advertising, social media is going to be, digital world is going to be in April, but in May you will see the ads in National Geographic, Discovery, CNN, and of course all over the world. So I'm really excited about that.
You've been here how long now as ambassador?
Almost 2 years and a half.
And that means that you were here for...
Well, I serve at the pleasure of the president, so you know, you never know how long you're going to stay here, or if it will need it in somewhere else place.
What is it like being a woman ambassador in Washington, D.C.?
Well, to tell the truth, I'm starting to like it, and I come more for the policy making side, you know, what you will call more like a technocrat. And it's been quite a trip. It's been quite an interesting experience and an honor, a really great honor to represent my country here. And I have met wonderful people from all over the world. Of course, they picked their best to come to here, to Washington. And I have met so many friends, and I have experienced the warmth and the openness of North Americans here. So I feel very happy and blessed to have the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador.
To you.